Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Ambassador Comissiong, good morning to you.
Good morning, Pearson. It's a pleasure to be here with you again.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, I have the sad duty to give Barbadians the tragic news that just yesterday we lost one of our great sons of Barbados, a great son of the Caribbean. I speak of Robert Bobby Clark, the very well-known Barbadian attorney at law, political activist, who believed to his core in Caribbean integration and in the concept of one Caribbean. We lost him yesterday at the age of 90. So it's my duty to Barbadians who may not be aware to let that news go forth.
Thank you for that. And you know, it perhaps is a good time for younger Barbadians to take some time to do some research about who he was and his body of work as he continued to be an activist locally. And so we extend indeed with you deepest condolences to his loved one and his relatives of recent memory. And so let's get started then in our conversation. Look at the work of the Prime Minister, who recently addressed the United Nations General Assembly, and what an outstanding speech it is. She brought very well into focus regional issues and also global issues. Let's start with a look at Haiti, and I want to play with you some extracts from her speech, and then I'll have you comment right after. So let's look at Haiti and what she said.
Any attempt to increase fuel prices any part of the world by 150% would have been met with great consternation and anger by populations on fixed income. And when that happens in one of the poorest countries in the world that has been trying for almost 230 years to find stability, and against the backdrop of exploitation that it has faced, we ask ourselves, to what end will the world stand up and be counted for the people of Haiti?
Over time, Ambassador, you and I, we've been talking about this. Where do we now go with Haiti? How do we get the world's attention and the need to address the issue of Haiti? And there was the Prime Minister on the global stage assisting in that.
She did put it into her speech. Basically, what she was doing was reminding the world leaders and the global audience that there's this outstanding agenda item that has been neglected for far too long. I think almost all of the CARICOM heads of government did mention Haiti. I wish that they had perhaps been a little bit more specific. I wish that they perhaps had gone there to say, well, this is what we are doing in CARICOM, and this is what we now need you, the international community, to do. But I'm glad that she gave them that reminder. CARICOM does have some initiatives. We are now in the process of putting together a group of special envoys. And if you listen to the speech at the UN of the Haitian Minister of Foreign Affairs, he was very specific in saying that Haiti is looking to CARICOM to lead a process to bring everybody together to work out a national compact as to how they go forward politically and constitutionally. So just to let our people know that CARICOM is working on an initiative, and Barbados will be part of a small group, special envoys, who will engage with Haitian society to try to craft this way forward.
One of our other neighbors, Cuba, I know you have a very special place in your heart for it as well. You know, she also, the Prime Minister, took the time to be able to say so. And what I love about her speech was, as one of the greatest orators in the world, she got their attention. So let's look at her extract on Cuba, and then I'll let you comment right after.
Similarly, we ask for the same transparency to occur with respect to the removal of the blockade against the people of Cuba. This is the 30th year that the resolution has called for that removal of that blockade. But it has been there for 60 years. And I say simply to the people of the United States of America, do not be short-sighted in your goals. For in this hemisphere, peace and prosperity is the province of all. And yes, there may be problems on both sides, but there is nothing that justifies further hardship to people because of ideological differences. And if there are human rights differences, let us resolve them, as we have chosen to do with mightier countries across the world without the imposition of sanctions. Fairness and transparency demand it of us.
It demands it of us, fairness and transparency. What does it all mean to you, Ambassador, to have the Prime Minister speak with such passion about that at the Assembly?
Yes, this was very, very powerful. Routinely, every year, CARICOM heads of government go to the UN and include this almost formal or ritual demand that the United States adhere to international law, listen to the collective voice of the international community, and remove the blockade. Because every year there's a resolution. It has been going on now for 30 years, and virtually the entire world votes in favor of the resolution to remove the blockade. Yet the United States continues to defy. But I think what the Prime Minister did, she made a direct appeal to the people of the United States, and she zeroed in. This thing about this economic blockade is really about affecting the lives of real people in Cuba, ordinary Cuban citizens, you know. So this was a very effective appeal by our Prime Minister. It is coming in the 50th anniversary year of the establishment of relations between CARICOM and Cuba, when CARICOM broke the diplomatic isolation that had been imposed on revolutionary Cuba. And on the 6th of December, we in Barbados will be hosting a CARICOM Cuba Heads of Government Summit to commemorate that 50th anniversary. But really and truly, we need the United States to hearken to the words of the Prime Minister. She's telling them that this blockade is an anachronism. The time for this has long passed, and we in the Caribbean, we have long accepted Cuba as a member of our family of nations, and we don't need that kind of Cold War politics disturbing our Caribbean and causing distress to some 10, 11 million Caribbean citizens in Cuba. So let's hope that the Americans apply their hearts to wisdom, as our Prime Minister is wont to say.
Yes, indeed. Now, at the height of the pandemic, and particularly at the beginning of it, the Prime Minister was always talking about access to critical public good and how the larger nations were oftentimes squeezing the smaller nations. I think she took some time while addressing the whole concern of an advocacy for the creation of an international fund to deliver those public goods, critical public goods. Let's take a look at her speech there, and then we'll comment right after.
We believe today that the most appropriate place to deal with global public goods is in fact the World Bank Group. And I'll speak more to this tomorrow, but I want to simply say that if companies, multinational companies, have contributed to the global public risk or benefit from the solutions for global public goods, then they ought to contribute to their resolution through a percentage, a small percentage of their profits, funding the needs of countries, whether it is in the issue of climate, stability and resilience and adaptation, whether it is for the protection of biodiversity both on land and in our waters, whether it is for the protection of public health against the next pandemic, the slow motion pandemic of antimicrobial resistance, or others that we have not even contemplated, or the provision of education for each of our citizens, because to remain on this earth without the benefit of education is to be sentenced to life imprisonment from a young age. Or access to electricity, as 600 million people in Africa do without it, or the equivalent to the right to knowledge and prosperity in our age, that is access to broadband. And of course, as I said to Congress last week, believe it or not, the right to a bank account, because countries across the world are being denied the right to access correspondent banking and leaving their citizens and their economies to function as financial pariahs in a world that is supposed to be globally interdependent for the movement of capital. My friends, the provision of that fund to promote public goods at a global level is critical if we are to make a difference going forward and to achieve the peace, the love, and the prosperity to which I referred.
One would almost think, Ambassador, that was straightforward. They ought to have surely got it.
Yes, I need Barbadians to be aware of how significant a role our country is playing in world affairs. This is a very ambitious agenda, but a very needed and realistic agenda. Basically, what we are doing is saying to the world, look, we have to deal with the real issues confronting mankind, not in the last century, but in this 21st century. And all of these international institutions that were constructed, you know, back in the mid 20th century, these all need to be revamped and refocused now. And she gave a list. She gave a list of what are, when she says the global public goods, these are the critical international norms, the critical international benefits that must be available to every human being. Access to public health, that we can withstand pandemics and all kinds of diseases. Access to education for every boy and girl, every young man and every young woman. Having access to electricity all across the world. So this is extremely important. Protecting against the climate crisis, actually trying to save humanity from an impending existential disaster. So Barbados is playing a very critical role in trying to reshape the entire international order to bring it into the 21st century and to connect it with the real threats that are facing humanity today, and you know, and to give it that impetus to really do something of substance to come to the protection of developing countries and the people who live in developing countries all over the world. So we need to pay attention to this, because we need to be, and we, the people of Barbados, need to be engaged in this critical diplomacy that our country is leading.
Speaking of significant substance and new diplomacy, the new Bridgetown Agenda, you know, for a call for reparative reform of the international economic and political order. And we would have heard the Secretary General of UN, Antonio Guterres, himself endorsing this. So let's listen to the Prime Minister as she speaks on this new Bridgetown Agenda, and then I want to hear you define it for us a little bit clearer so that every Barbadian gets a chance to understand what that agenda is.
I want to commend the International Monetary Fund for their rapid financing mechanism at the beginning of the pandemic crisis, and soon for the resilience. We have incurred debts for COVID, we have incurred debts for climate, and we have incurred debts now in order to fight this difficult moment with the inflationary crisis and with the absence of certainty of supply of goods. Why, therefore, must the developing world now seek to find money within 7 to 10 years, when others had the benefit of longer tenors to repay their money? I want, finally, to deal with the issue very quickly and to suggest to you that all of these things have been the subject not just of idle thought or arbitrary comment on our part. We had the good fortune of collecting in Barbados a large number of persons from civil society and academia at the beginning of August, end of July. And we settled on what we have come to call the Bridgetown Agenda, because we believe it to be a Bridgetown agenda for peace, a Bridgetown agenda for prosperity, a Bridgetown agenda inspired by love of humanity. And it is that agenda that speaks to the reform of the Bretton Woods architecture. We've asked and will ask countries and people to join it, because we believe that unless we take responsibility for ourselves, unless we accept that we are the world, we're not going to see a change.
Unless we accept that we are the world, we're not going to see change. Ambassador, over to you. Tell us a little bit about what the Bridgetown Agenda is, and yeah, just tell us what it is.
Well, just as the Prime Minister said, again, Barbadians really need to be very proud of our country. We took the initiative of inviting and bringing to Barbados some of the leading minds, some of the leading minds in finance and economic affairs. They came to Barbados towards the end of July, going into August, and they brainstormed in Barbados. And basically, they asked themselves, what are the really critical issues facing the world today? And they identified them: the climate crisis. They identified them, the debt crisis that it is looming, that is facing so many developing countries because of the pandemic, because of the shutdowns, because of the spiraling consumer prices caused by the war in Ukraine. The challenge of development. You know, the UN, we have these sustainable development goals that are supposed to be achieved by 2030. Really basic goals about people's proper education, proper health care, proper access to water supplies, etc. So they brainstormed these critical issues, and then they came up with a blueprint. So how do we deal with the debt crisis? The IMF and World Bank and these institutions and the powerful countries of the world, they need to understand that this crisis is real. They need to understand that all these debts that developing countries had to take on because of the pandemic, you cannot expect them to have to pay these debts in the short term. We have to expand payments over an extensive period. So they've come up with very specific demands and reforms to the system. The climate crisis, if we do not substantially scale up the response to putting in place measures to mitigate against global warming, to adapt to global warming, we are not going to stop the global temperature from rising beyond 1.5 degrees by the end of this century. So again, they've come up with a program to see how they can scale up the finance, to billions and billions of dollars to really seriously make a dent in this problem. The Sustainable Development Goals, they're saying they've come up with the new thinking that the institutions, the financial institutions that were established in the last century, they are basically still dealing with problems of the last century, while we have much more serious and urgent issues that they need to be revamped and refocused to deal with. So all of these prescriptions have been pulled together under the rubric of something called the Bridgetown Agenda. And it's the Prime Minister and her team took the opportunity of the UN General Assembly to present it to the world, to discuss it with important world leaders.
Yes.
And what we're going to have to do now is really to mount an international diplomacy campaign to bring everybody behind this Bridgetown Agenda, to really institute meaningful and substantial solutions to critical problems facing our world today.
Ambassador Comissiong, we have to leave it there, but quite a substantial amount of information shared by the Prime Minister when she addressed the United Nations General Assembly, of which we're all very proud because, as I said within my conversation with you, one of the greatest orators in the world who gets your attention. Ambassador, as always, thank you so much. We look forward to next week's in Conversation on CARICOM, if it be God's will. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you, Pearson. Much appreciated.
Likewise.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.